What is your why of what you do?
The why of what I do is because I picture a world, and of course, that means you and I and everyone in it, where there is a greater conscious evolution and alignment, where there is a greater flow of folks developing themselves versus just going day to day to day and kind of getting lost in that. It's like getting lost in autopilot. So the why of what I do really is about helping folks to, including my own self, of course, as I've gone on this journey quite a few years ago, Harry, to align more with that authentic self that I am, and with that, with the authentic self of what folks are, who folks are, instead of losing themselves in the roles that they're playing as a father, as a corporate leader, or whatever that role is. So that's a big part of really allowing folks to thrive instead of just survive, and realize autopilot does not have to be part of your day to day.
Tell me more about that so I understand that better.
So basically, when I talk about conscious evolution, I talk about really folks to become more in tune with what their day to day even looks like, right? And becoming more mindful to really move from a this automated state of being, which is 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I'm going to wake up and then I'm going to do this, and kind of getting stuck in that. So instead of doing that, really becoming more present within their own life, where they're embracing a more aligned way of living, and where they're becoming more adaptable, and they navigate with greater ease and intentionality into their day-to-day life. So it's basically to learn really to navigate in your life with greater intentionality and ease. So, of course, when you do that, you become more present to your life and as you're doing it. And some of the things that may have been important before are no longer important. It's like, why was I stressing over that so much? Or why did I take that role on so much? So that's really the first part of what I see, Harry, is the more conscious flow of evolution, where life becomes more of a flow instead of a forced state that you are pushing yourself.
So my first question in exploring what you just mentioned is why do that? Like
Why do that?
why do we uh, go into that flow state instead of the one most people are living?
The forced state?
Yeah.
Because that's a great question. Because there's a lot of exhaustion versus empowered leadership.
Tell me more.
So leaders are exhausted. They're coming to my office and they're exhausted of pushing and moving along the same old way. And it's no longer clicking in the same way. I think it used to work at one point to a certain degree. And so, when I think when COVID happened, a lot of folks had to start to look in a mirror. Oh, whoa, I've been living on autopilot. This marriage no longer works. Or this work schedule no longer works, where folks had to become much more aware and go from really recognizing the exhaustion that they were feeling, and go into more of a self-empowered leadership, first and foremost within themselves, because all change starts by changing yourself from the inside out. So exhaustion is really a big part of it. The other part of it is I think it's no longer working. I think the old way of thinking, of being trying to fit a peg into a square, it's just no longer working. It no longer fits. So it's starting to really move much more from force to flow. right? And then from that, from stress to creating more clarity, more alignment. Again, developing that internal state of mindfulness, meaning just a tool, in order to become more present and to then lead and wake up into a more conscious state of being versus just doing.
So let's talk more about that side. What does that flow state of being and of being present look like?
So first of all, becoming present through mindfulness is that's simply just a beginning, right? That's a tool that I often use. Become more mindful and aware of what am I doing? How am I doing it? Why am I doing it in your day-to-day life, right? Once you start to do that, there's a much greater level of awareness, and that will then allow you to become more present. When you become more present, that's when you can really start to clarify your priorities. I'm talking personal or professional, where you can start to create much more of a holistic success, not at the cost of you, but because of you, right? And again, it's instead of working at nauseum at the same activities or at the same jobs or at the same roles that you may some of them really not like. It's becoming much more present. And of course, that opens up a different level of innovation. That opens up a different level of creativity. That opens up a different level of spontaneity to be able to tap into the moment and go, oh, I was going to, in the past, push through this thing, but we need to allow life to create a different timing in order to step and ride that wave. That's maybe a little metaphorically speaking, but of course, being and living in a flow state doesn't mean you're not going to plan ahead. It just means you've become more present, you've become more innovative, you've become more aware of what's actually circling around you. So instead of riding these waves over here, you're gonna hop on these business or personal opportunities over here.
So let's explore that a little bit more. What does that look like in like with an example or day to day life for, let's say, for you, Daniela?
So for me, on a day-to-day basis, I'll give you a really good example. Years ago, because I'm quite left and right-brained, Harry. So, which is probably why I work with corporate folks, but I also am very intuitive. But years ago, I used to much more have a quite rigid schedule to check mark things off the list. That's my left brain, right? I love to get stuff done. When I started to go more into a flow state, it was a little unsettling at the beginning, should I say, because suddenly I'm like, oh, right? I'm like, I'm really having to pivot. But once I started to embrace more of that flow state in my day to day life, I started to be more intuitive in terms of the opportunities. And I was more aware. I had a greater situational awareness, particularly professionally, where in the past, maybe I would have gone, oh, I want that opportunity. I got to really go after that. Where I realized it's the timing is not right now. It'll come back around in a different way. So you develop a different level of trust in life that the right people synchronistically will show up at the right time.
And how has that helped the people that you work with at the same time?
So how it's helped them in the way that I work with them is really on it's very much multifold, and I hear this often from the different leaders. It's because a lot of my work is about self-mastery. So what they're realizing as they are moving more into their internal leadership and they're changing their inner dialogue and their intentionality. it really starts to improve their emotional intelligence a lot regarding themselves, but also the team that they're working with. Or that could be a husband or a wife or the children, but of course, they always come back and say, "You know what? It started to become a ripple." Because in habit 1 of my book, High Performance Without Pain, it's about reduce anxiety, pain, and chaos. And they end up realizing, Harry, how they disconnect from the present moment, how they numb out, how they are not present to what's actually happening versus what they're projecting of what might be happening, their idea of what's happening. So really, it's they're rejecting the present the way it is. They're not allowing themselves to be in a flow state. So really, much greater self-awareness, emotional intelligence, really leading by example in that way, much more. And I think through also embracing a greater level of vulnerability and leading that way, that is they lead in this way much more by example.
What would you say? I mean, first, thank you for sharing that, and
Mhm.
that's really helps me understand what your vision's about and where do you see it. Um, when it comes to applying those things in let's say in practical terms to someone, what tips would you give entrepreneurs or leaders?
So first of all, I would say start to develop a mindfulness practice.
A what practice?
A mindfulness practice.
Mindfulness practice. Okay.
Yes. So mindfulness and intentionality are very, very important. Actually, I have a free meditation on regarding the power of intention. And so to basically that brings it back to, instead of just moving through your day like in a hurry, next, 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 how we're all used to, right? To stop, review, think, create an internal alignment. So it's starting with a mindfulness practice, and actually I have a workbook where I help my clients through this process of what this looks like. It's actually more simple than what it sounds. But oftentimes I suggest review your week at a glance on Sunday and take a look at what that week looks like and try to bring it into alignment with yourself personally and professionally, where you can work more toward your internal validation versus external validation, where you are recognizing this thing is not in alignment with my true goals, right? Because oftentimes I see folks being so busy working on everyone else's goals or dreams, and yet themselves, they go on empty. Hence the leaders coming to me and they're saying, this is just no longer working. I'm exhausted because they've given the person that really is the main actor, the star of their life script, they've given that person away. So this is really about infusing the roles that you are playing with all of who you are on a holistic level, bringing in that authentic self. So mindfulness practice, looking at the activities that you're doing ahead of time and taking a look at, how does this really serve me, right? Letting go of guilt that you're not doing enough, right? I should be doing this, that, and the other, right? So really finding a greater alignment in your work, in your relationships, by listening to your intuition without continually chasing sometimes rigid and unrealistic expectations.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.